Ever since I can remember, I struggled with anxiety. As a young kid, I had really uncomfortable emotions going on. I hated being in my own skin. And at about the age of 15, I started turning to alcohol to anesthetize my anxiety. And it was like the perfect match made on earth, so to speak, for a 15-year-old rebellious. I never heard the gospel till I was 19 years of age. And so at 15, I turned to alcohol to deal with my anxiety, this mental health crisis that I was struggling with. And we didn't even use language like that. Didn't use language like anxiety disorder. But I was turning to alcohol. And that's what people can start doing when they're struggling with anxiety or these mental health issues. So I turned to alcohol, turned to drugs, turned to heavy promiscuity, always looking for the next girl. And my life was just getting overwhelmed with guilt. And it was creating paranoia in my life. And by the time I heard the gospel for the first time in my life at the age of 19, when I heard Greg Laurie preaching on a Monday night in Southern California, I resonated with him. He used words like dude, cool, bro, and stoked. He was just a total beach guy, old partier. And I was trying to get two questions answered. What do I do with my guilt, and what's the purpose of my life? And Jesus answered both of those at the cross. And I gave my life to Jesus, but my anxiety just didn't roll away because I became a Christian. And my addictions didn't roll away just because I became a Christian. And so I battled with alcoholism for another year and a half or so before I go to AA at the age of 21, October 9th, 1994. And I do over 400 meetings as a 21-year-old in my first year of sobriety trying to get cleaned up. And getting cleaned up exposed me to so many more emotions and so much more anxiety that I hardly knew what to do with it. Well, as I started getting cleaned up, I fell in love with Jesus, got a full-time call to ministry, would go off to Bible college, go off to seminary, then after seminary, go plant a church. And then you fast forward out and had almost 23 years of sobriety, and I had a relapse. I had a relapse because my anxiety was still there. And I was trying to figure out, what do I do with this? And not only was my anxiety there, I started going into depression, a dark night of the soul. And depression will make you want to just end it all. It will leave you feeling hopeless. There's a loneliness that is palpable and a desperation that is felt. And in my life, I thought maybe I could enjoy a glass of wine or a glass of beer. It wasn't like when I was a kid, I was wanting to go out and just get smashed. I was just hoping to be able to take the edge off a bit. And within 6 months, I was back in AA again, and I quickly realized that I've just got this thing called alcoholism, and I can't mess with it anymore. And the truth of the matter is when I look over my past and I consider the anxiety and the depression and the addiction, and what all that does to my life and my mental health, I realize I'm not alone. And maybe that's you. You struggle with some of these issues. Well, what exactly is depression? It basically causes chronic unhappiness in your life. And when we are struggling with chronic unhappiness, what are we going to do? We're going to strive to anesthetize ourselves. So we're going to look to drugs, or we're going to look to alcohol, or we're going to look to escape, or we're going to look to sleep. And all of this stuff just creates further consequences in our life. One of the things that I came to realize recently is how much I struggled trusting God, even in full-time ministry. I don't know what it is about me. I'm tempted to pay more attention to my anxiety and my depression and listen to the cues that that's given me than knowing how to truly lean into God. It's a deep process for me to trust, because at the core of my depression and at the core of my anxiety is the question, God, are you enough? God, will you come through? There's a certain kind of trial that you and I can go through in life where you look out over life and you're so depressed, you're so empty, you're hurting so deeply, and there's nothing circumstantially that you can see that can give you joy. And you find yourself asking the question, how do I go forward? How do I find my joy again? And did you know that God would have us to find our joy in knowing that our reactions are pleasing to Him. Our reactions of acceptance, of the depression, the anxiety, of just being willing to trust Him that He can work good out of this dark night of the soul that we're going through. So for example, the apex, as Larry Crabbs talked about, a counselor, of Christian maturity is when everything's been stripped away from you and there's no joy that you can find externally. And that place you find your joy is knowing that your response to the trials, your response to the depression, your response to the suffering is a response that would please God. And you find joy in knowing that your response brings God glory. Wow. That's a hard place to arrive at, but you get the picture. Depression. If you're struggling with it, I want to encourage you to consider seeing a doctor. It could be that you are involved in addiction, anxiety, stress, but if you don't take care of those issues, it can lead to the worst form of mental health, and that is depression. And depression, if left untreated, can lead to, unfortunately, suicide. And so make sure you see a doctor, make sure you talk to your pastor, and make sure that you're not resistant to taking medication if there's something that can do to help you. We'll talk about that in the next episode.